He thought his nod alone could determine my fate. The project I'd poured my soul into for 18 months, dismissed with a wave of his hand during that humiliating board meeting. But what he rejected became the blade of my revenge, driven straight into the heart of his career. They say success is the best revenge. I disagree. Watching him lose everything he'd built while I thrived on the very innovation he'd mocked, that was revenge. And I orchestrated every beautiful, devastating moment of his downfall. My name is Elena Morris. And at 32, I thought I'd finally found my place at Bright Core Technologies. 5 years of climbing their corporate ladder, countless nights debugging code, and more coffee than any human should consume. All leading to this moment in Conference Room A on the 42nd floor. The Seattle skyline stretched behind Richard Callahan as he flipped through my presentation slides with the enthusiasm of someone reviewing a grocery list. My hands were steady on the mahogany table, but underneath, my knee bounced with barely contained energy. This was it. My baby. My breakthrough. An AI-powered platform for optimizing green energy distribution across smart grids. So, Elena? Richard's voice cut through the hum of the air conditioning. He didn't look up from his tablet. You're proposing we pivot significant resources to this pet project of yours? Pet project. The words stung, but I kept my voice level. The Green Grid AI system could revolutionize how companies manage their renewable energy consumption. With the new federal mandates coming, could. He finally looked up, his gray eyes cold behind designer glasses. That's a very expensive word, isn't it? The other executives around the table shifted uncomfortably. Jennifer from strategic development wouldn't meet my eyes. Marcus from engineering suddenly found his phone fascinating. I'd thought they were allies. I'd thought wrong. The prototype has shown a 43% improvement in energy efficiency during testing. I pressed on, pulling up the data visualization I'd spent weeks perfecting. 3 potential clients have already expressed interest if we can deliver by Q3. Richard leaned back in his chair, that particular smile playing on his lips, the one that preceded every public execution I'd witnessed in this room. Elena, I admire your enthusiasm. Really, I do. But Brightcore isn't a playground for every programmer who thinks they've invented the next big thing. The word programmer dripped with condescension. Not engineer. Not senior developer. Programmer. Like I was some entry-level coder who'd gotten too ambitious. The market analysis shows, I started, but he raised his hand. The market shows us that our current enterprise solutions are performing adequately. We don't need to chase every shiny new trend, especially not one championed by someone who should be focusing on their assigned projects. He closed my presentation with a decisive swipe. This meeting was a courtesy, Elena, nothing more. The silence that followed was suffocating. 12 people in that room. And not one would speak up. Not for the months of research I'd done on my own time. Not for the potential sitting right in front of them. I understand, I said, gathering my materials with practiced calm. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Never let them see you break, mija. Never give them that satisfaction. Richard was already moving on to the next agenda item before I reached the door. Oh, and Elena? I paused, hand on the handle. Next time you want to waste executive time, perhaps run it by your direct supervisor first. Save us all the embarrassment. The laughter that followed me out was quiet but unmistakable. Professional, polite, cruel. I made it to the bathroom before my hands started shaking. In the mirror, my reflection looked exactly as composed as I'd trained it to be, brown eyes steady, dark hair still perfectly pinned, the blazer I'd bought specifically for this presentation still crisp, but underneath, something had shifted. 5 years. 5 years of being the good soldier, playing by their rules, believing that merit would speak for itself. I'd watched Richard take credit for 2 of my solutions, seen him promote men with half my experience, endured every microaggression with a smile. But this, killing my project without even truly considering it, this was different. I pulled out my phone and texted Marissa. Presentation didn't go well. Wine tonight? Her response was immediate. Red or white, never mind. I'll bring both. Walking back to my desk, I passed the wall of awards and recognition. Bright Core Technologies, Innovation Leader of the Year. The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted innovation, just not from someone like me, not from Elena Morris, the programmer who'd forgotten her place. But as I sat down at my workstation, staring at the code I'd written for Richard's latest strategic initiative, a different thought began to form. He'd dismissed my project, yes, but he'd also made a crucial mistake. He'd never asked who owned the underlying code. The wine was already half empty when Marissa finally said what we were both thinking. You should quit. Today. Right now. Email that bastard and tell him exactly where he can shove his strategic initiatives. I swirled the Malbec in my glass, watching the legs form and disappear. My apartment felt smaller tonight. The Seattle rain drumming against windows that overlooked a city full of tech companies that would probably treat me exactly the same way. And do what? I asked. Every company in this city has a Richard Callahan, different face, same bullshit. You're brilliant, Elena. You know that, right? Marissa tucked her legs under herself on my couch. That presentation you showed me last week, it was revolutionary. Apparently, not revolutionary enough. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. You should have seen them. Riss. Jennifer sat there like I was presenting a bake sale idea. Marcus actually checked his fantasy football lineup while I was talking about the energy optimization metrics. My phone buzzed. Tom from the infrastructure team. Heard about this morning. That was fucked up. Coffee tomorrow if you need to vent. At least someone had the decency to acknowledge it. Tom had witnessed Richard's power plays before, had even been on the receiving end once when he'd suggested improvements to the legacy system. But Tom was a white guy from Stanford. He'd bounce back within a month. Me. I was the Latina woman who'd graduated from state. Different rules applied. You know what the worst part is? I said, pouring another glass. I stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting that presentation. Missed my nephew's birthday party last weekend to run more tests. And for what? To be called a programmer like it's 1995 and I'm typing code in some basement? Marissa's face darkened. He called you that? In front of everyone, made sure to emphasize it too. Not developer, not engineer, certainly not senior software architect, which is my actual fucking title. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. 5 years, Riss. 5 years of being the first one in, last one out. 5 years of fixing their disasters while they golf at Rainier. Remember when you saved their asses during the Morgan Industries breach? Marissa reminded me. You worked 72 hours straight to patch that vulnerability. And Richard got a bonus for excellent crisis management. I pulled up LinkedIn on my phone, scrolling through connections I'd made over the years. Smiling faces at conferences, promising to stay in touch and grab coffee soon. How many would actually take my call if I said I was looking? My mom called yesterday, I said quietly. Asked how the big presentation went. She was so proud when I told her about it last month. Said her daughter was finally going to show those tech bros what she's made of. So show them, Marissa said suddenly, sitting up straighter. Elena, you built that entire platform yourself, right? On your own time? Mostly, used some open source frameworks, but the core algorithm, the optimization engine, that's all mine, nights and weekends for the past year. So Brightcore doesn't own it. I stopped mid-sip. What? Think about it. If you developed it independently, outside of work hours, using your own resources. Marissa was in full lawyer mode now. She worked in intellectual property law. And I could see the gears turning. Check your employment contract, but typically, if it wasn't part of your assigned duties and you didn't use company resources. It's mine, I whispered. The realization hit me like cold water. Holy shit, it's actually mine. Richard just rejected a project he never owned. Marissa grinned. The question is, what are you going to do with that information? I thought about this morning, the dismissal, the humiliation, the laughter following me out. Then I thought about my code, elegant and efficient, sitting on my personal laptop. The 3 companies that had expressed interest, the former colleague who'd moved to venture capital and kept asking me when I was going to take the leap. You know what Richard said to me last month? I asked. During my performance review, he said I needed to learn to stay in my lane. That innovation was for people who understood the bigger picture. Asshole. Yeah, well, maybe it's tried to show him just how big my lane actually is. I pulled out my laptop, opening the folder labeled Green Grid AI. 18 months of work stared back at me, my work, my innovation, my future. What are you doing? Marissa asked, moving closer. Research, I said, pulling up Washington State's employment law regarding intellectual property. And then I'm going to make some calls. If Brightcore doesn't want my innovation, maybe someone else will. The rain had turned into a storm now, wind rattling the windows. But for the first time since this morning, I didn't feel small. I felt something else entirely. I felt dangerous. The law office smelled like leather and old money. I sat across from David Reeves, the intellectual property attorney Marissa had recommended, watching him methodically review my employment contract with Brightcore. His expression gave nothing away, but I noticed him making notes in the margins. Lots of notes. Miss Morris, he finally said, setting down his pen. You developed this entire platform outside of work hours? Every line of code was written on my personal laptop, at home or in coffee shops. I have Git commits with timestamps to prove it. Never accessed Brightcore's servers, never used their development environment. And this project wasn't part of your assigned duties? My job description is focused on maintaining and updating Brightcore's existing enterprise solutions. The Green Grid AI platform was... I searched for the right words. A passion project, something I believed could change how companies approach renewable energy. David nodded slowly. The good news is, Brightcore's employment agreement has a significant loophole. They claim ownership of work created within the scope of employment or using company resources. You did neither. He leaned back, fingers steepled. The better news is, since they formally rejected the project in a documented meeting, they've essentially waived any potential claim they might have tried to make. My heart raced. So you can do whatever you want with your intellectual property. Patent it, license it, build a company around it. He smiled for the first time. The best news? Richard Callahan just gave you written proof, via meeting minutes, that Brightcore has no interest in this technology. I'd requested those meeting minutes from Jennifer's assistant yesterday, claiming I needed them for my records. She'd sent them without question. There it was in black and white. Project rejected due to lack of strategic alignment. R. Callahan. I want to file for a patent, I said. Today, if possible. David was already pulling up forms on his computer. I can fast-track a provisional patent. That gives you immediate protection while we prepare the full application. Fee is $3,000 for my services, plus filing costs. $3,000. That was most of my savings, but I handed over my credit card without hesitation. This was my shot. While David prepared the paperwork, I stepped into the hallway and made a call I'd been preparing for 2 days. Elena, what a surprise. James Morrison's voice was warm. He'd left Brightcore 2 years ago to join a venture capital firm focused on clean tech. How's life in the corporate trenches? Actually, James, I'm calling about an opportunity. Remember that energy optimization platform I mentioned at the Climate Tech Conference last year? The AI-driven grid management system. Elena, that was brilliant. Please tell me Brightcore finally greenlit it. They passed on it, I said carefully, which means I'm free to pursue other options. The pause on the other end was electric. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I own the IP. I have a working prototype, and I need seed funding to turn it into a company. Jesus Christ, Elena, do you realize what you're sitting on? With the new federal mandates, every major corporation is scrambling for exactly this kind of solution. I could hear him typing rapidly. Can you send me a demo? Technical specs? Anything? I can do better. I can show you 3 potential clients who've already expressed interest. Who? Pacific Power Solutions, Emerald Energy, and Boeing Sustainability Division. James whistled low. You've been busy. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm clearing my Friday afternoon. You're going to come to our offices and present to my partners. If it's as good as I think it is, we're talking about a $2 million seed round to start. $2 million. I gripped the phone tighter. James, I need you to know, I'm not looking for an acqui-hire. I'm not building this just to sell it back to Brightcore or anyone else. I want to run this company. Good. Founders with a grudge build the best companies. They've got something to prove. He chuckled. Besides, from what I heard through the grapevine, Richard Callahan had it coming. Man's been taking credit for other people's work for years. After I hung up, I stood in that law office hallway for a moment, letting it sink in. 2 days ago, I'd been humiliated, dismissed, reduced to nothing in a conference room full of people who wouldn't defend me. Now I was filing a patent and scheduling meetings with VCs. I thought about Richard, probably sitting in his corner office right now, congratulating himself on shutting down another unnecessary expense. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. David emerged with a folder. All set. The provisional patent will be filed within 24 hours. I've also drafted a cease and desist template in case Brightcore tries anything after you go public with this. They won't, I said, thinking of Richard's arrogance. They made their position very clear. Innovation isn't for people like me, remember? Well then, David handed me the folder. I guess you'll just have to prove them wrong. Walking out of that office into the Seattle afternoon, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. But beneath the fear was something else, something that had been building since that morning in Conference Room A. Anticipation? Richard Callahan was about to learn what happened when you underestimated Elena Morris. The garage smelled like burned coffee and ambition. 3 months had passed since I'd walked out of Brightcore for the last time. And Greenshift Labs was born in this converted space in Fremont, squeezed between a craft brewery and a Vietnamese restaurant. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard's office had a view of the Space Needle, while I had a view of a dumpster that got emptied every Tuesday at 5 a.m. Servers crashing again, called out Marcus Kim. Yes, the same Marcus who'd checked fantasy football during my presentation. He'd quit Brightcore a month after me, showing up at my door with a bottle of whiskey and an apology. I was a coward, he'd said, but I want to make it right. Now he was my CTO, working for equity and ramen money. It's not crashing, I said, fingers flying across my keyboard. It's the load balancer. The demo with Emerald Energy is in 3 hours, and we're getting hammered by their security tests. Elena, you need to sleep, said Priya. Our third employee, a brilliant data scientist I'd poached from Amazon with promises of equity and purpose. When did you last go home? Home. I'd been sleeping on the couch in the corner for 2 days, living on Thai food from next door and sheer determination. James's VC firm had come through with initial funding, but $2 million didn't go as far as you'd think in Seattle. Every dollar mattered. I'll sleep when we close Emerald, I muttered, fixing the configuration. There. Try it now. The green lights on our makeshift server rack, 6 machines I'd bought refurbished and named after female scientists, blinked back to life. Marie Curie was running hot, but she'd hold. My phone buzzed. Tom from Brightcore. Heard Richards freaking out about losing Pacific Power. They name-dropped Greenshift in the cancellation meeting. I allowed myself a small smile. Pacific Power Solutions had been Richards' biggest client relationship, worth $8 million annually. They'd signed with us last week, not for $8 million, but for exclusive rights to implement our platform. The contract was worth less money, but infinitely more satisfaction. We need a real office, Marcus said, looking around at the exposed pipes and concrete floors. The Boeing team seemed skeptical when they visited last week. Boeing's old school, I replied. They want marble lobbies and executive dining rooms. We're not that company. What company are we? Priya asked, genuinely curious. I thought about it. What were we? 3 engineers and a part-time contractor, working 18-hour days in a garage that flooded when it rained too hard. But we were also the company that had just made Pacific Power's energy grid 34% more efficient in our pilot program. We were the company that had 9 patents pending and interest from 3 Fortune 500 companies. We're the company that does what Brightcore said was impossible, I finally answered. The Emerald Energy demo went flawlessly. Their CEO, Patricia Huang, watched our platform redistribute power loads in real time, optimizing solar and wind inputs across their test grid. The efficiency gains made her lean forward in her chair. How long did you say you've been developing this? She asked. The concept started 2 years ago, I said carefully. But GreenShift Labs has been fully operational for 3 months. 3 months? She looked skeptical. And you already have Pacific Power? We move fast when we're not bogged down by bureaucracy, I said, thinking of the 16 meetings it had taken just to get basic resources approved at Brightcore. When you believe in what you're building, you don't need 5 committees to approve every decision. Patricia smiled. I heard Richard Callahan called this technology unfeasible in a board meeting last month. News traveled fast in Seattle tech circles. Richard's entitled to his opinion, I said diplomatically. His loss? Our gain? Patricia stood, extending her hand. We want in. Exclusive rights for the Northwest residential sector. I'll have legal send over terms tomorrow. After she left, Marcus, Priya, and I sat in stunned silence. Then Priya started laughing, then Marcus, then me. We laughed until tears came, the exhaustion and stress of 3 months melting into something that felt dangerously like hope. That night, I finally went home to my apartment. The place felt foreign after practically living in the garage. I showered, ate real food that didn't come from a takeout container, and checked my bank account, still running on fumes personally. But GreenShift's account now had enough runway for 6 months. I thought about calling my mom, telling her about Emerald, about everything we'd accomplished. But it was 2 a.m., and she needed her sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop and looked at Richard's LinkedIn profile, still listed as VP of Strategic Development at Brightcore Technologies. His latest post was about fostering innovation through traditional leadership structures. You have no idea what's coming, I whispered to his smiling professional headshot. Tomorrow, we'd announce the Emerald Energy Partnership. The Seattle Times was already sniffing around for a story about the garage startup revolutionizing green energy. 3 former Brightcore employees had reached out about joining us. The empire was starting to crack. Richard just didn't know it yet. The Washington State Convention Center buzzed with the energy of 1,000 tech conversations. Climate Tech Summit 2025, the premier gathering for green technology innovation. And GreenShift Labs had somehow scored a prime booth location, right across from Brightcore Technologies. That wasn't an accident, was it? Marcus asked, adjusting our display banner. James knows someone on the organizing committee, I admitted, smoothing my dress. A sharp, black number I'd bought specifically for this moment. Sometimes petty revenge and strategic positioning align perfectly. Richard's voice carried across the expo floor before I saw him. That commanding baritone that had dismissed so many ideas, crushed so many dreams. He was holding court at the Brightcore booth, gesturing at their generic, sustainable solutions for tomorrow display. Then he saw me. The moment stretched like pulled taffy. His eyes went from my face to our booth to the growing crowd gathering for our demo. I saw him register the GreenShift Labs logo, the former Brightcore innovation, now Independent Revolution tagline Priya had insisted on. Elena. He crossed the space between us with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Quite the setup you have here. Richard. I kept my voice neutral, professional. How's the strategic development division? Thriving. His smile was sharp. Though I heard you've been making some noise with your little startup. Garage operations, isn't it? Before I could respond, Patricia Huang from Emerald Energy appeared at my elbow. Elena, Perfect timing. I brought some people you need to meet. She glanced at Richard dismissively. Oh, hello, Richard. Still pushing those legacy systems. The shift in power was subtle but seismic. Richard, used to being the most important person in every conversation, suddenly found himself peripheral. Actually, Patricia, we were just discussing. He started. Elena, this is David Chung from the Department of Energy. He's very interested in what you demonstrated for us last week. Patricia steered me away without acknowledging Richard's unfinished sentence. The next hour was a blur. Our live demonstration drew a crowd that spilled into neighboring booths. I showed how GreenShift's AI could reduce energy waste by 40% while increasing renewable source integration by 60%. Real numbers, real results. Not the could and might that Richard had mocked. This is extraordinary, David Chung said into the microphone we'd given him to address the crowd. This is exactly the kind of innovation the Federal Green Initiative needs. I caught Richard watching from the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. Jennifer from Strategic Development stood beside him, whispering urgently in his ear while pointing at our display. During a break, Tom found me by the coffee station. You need to know something, he said quietly. Richard's been in emergency meetings all week. Pacific Power's cancellation triggered a board review. They're asking why Brightcore passed on technology that competitors are now calling revolutionary. Competitors? I raised an eyebrow. That's what they're calling you now. Not a startup, a competitor. He grinned. Also, 3 more of our engineers submitted resignations yesterday. Guess where they're hoping to land? The afternoon brought the moment I'd been waiting for. Richard approached our booth again, this time without his usual entourage. We should talk, he said quietly. About? Brightcore might be interested in acquiring your technology. We could offer significant compensation. I almost laughed. The same technology you called a pet project? The one that wasn't worth executive time? Markets evolve, companies adapt. His jaw was tight. Name your price. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale, Elena. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. Like you did. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. When you dismissed my work because it came from someone you saw as beneath you? When you humiliated me in front of 12 executives because you couldn't stand the idea that a programmer might innovate better than you? His face flushed. That's not Patricia, I called out, seeing her pass by. Richard was just asking about acquisition possibilities. Patricia laughed. Actually laughed. Richard, you had this technology in-house and threw it away. Elena's already fielding offers from companies that actually understand innovation. Real offers, from real innovators. A crowd was forming again, drawn by the tension. Tech journalists who'd been circling all day suddenly had their phones out, sensing blood in the water. Mr. Callahan, one reporter called out. Is it true Brightcore is reconsidering its innovation strategy after losing Pacific Power to GreenShift Labs? Richard's composed mask finally cracked. Brightcore's strategy remains solid. We don't comment on individual client relationships. But you did reject this technology when Ms. Morris was your employee, another journalist pressed. The silence was deafening. Richard looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. No comment, he said stiffly, retreating to the Brightcore booth. As the day wound down, James Morrison appeared with champagne. You know everyone's talking about this, right? David versus Goliath, except David's got better code. We toasted quietly, professionally. But inside, I was electric. Richard had come to me, had asked to buy what he'd thrown away, had been publicly connected to what might be the biggest strategic blunder in Brightcore's history. The summit wouldn't end for 2 more days, but the verdict was already in. GreenShift Labs wasn't just viable, we were the future Richard had failed to see. The contract signing took place at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, the kind of old-money Seattle venue where deals that changed industries were made. Constellation Energy Corporation, one of the largest energy companies in North America, had chosen the location deliberately. This wasn't just a contract, it was a coronation. $25 million for exclusive licensing rights to the Eastern Seaboard, their chief innovation officer, Margaret Stone, said as she slid the papers across the marble table. Plus royalties on every kilowatt hour optimized through your system. My hand was steady as I signed, but my heart was racing. Marcus and Priya flanked me, trying to look like we belonged in this room with its crystal chandeliers and oil paintings of long-dead industrialists. We'll need you to begin implementation within 60 days, Margaret continued. Our board is very eager to announce this partnership, especially after the public interest from the summit last month. Public interest. That was a delicate way of saying, since everyone learned Brightcore passed on this technology. The Seattle Times article had been brutal. How Brightcore's arrogance cost them the future of green energy. We'll be ready, I assured her. Our team has been preparing for rapid scaling. Our team, all 12 of us now, including 4 former Brightcore engineers who jumped ship after the summit. Each one had stories about Richard's management style, his tendency to claim credit, his dismissal of any idea that didn't originate from his inner circle. After the signing, Margaret pulled me aside. You should know, Richard Callahan called me personally last week, tried to convince me Brightcore had a similar solution in development. And I asked him why his company passed on yours if they were developing something similar. He didn't have an answer. She smiled. Then I asked why 5 of his top engineers now work for you. He hung up. The press release went out that afternoon. Constellation Energy partners with GreenShift Labs in landmark $25 million deal. Within hours, it was picked up by TechCrunch, Forbes, Bloomberg. My phone became unusable from the notifications, but one message stood out, from Jennifer at Brightcore. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Richard's fighting for his job. Thought you should know. I screenshot the message and sent it to Marissa with one word. Finally. That evening, we held a celebration at the garage-turned-office. We'd finally moved to a real space in South Lake Union, but kept the garage for sentimental reasons. 60 people crowded in, employees, investors, early supporters. James raised a glass. To Elena Morris, who turned corporate rejection into revolutionary innovation. To the team, I corrected. But I was smiling. Tom arrived late, looking shaken. You need to see this, he said, showing me his phone. An internal Brightcore memo leaked to Reddit. Effective immediately. The Strategic Development Division is undergoing restructuring. All ongoing projects will be reviewed for viability and market positioning. Restructuring. Marcus read over my shoulder. That's corporate speak for heads are rolling. The next morning, local news picked up the story. Brightcore Technologies announces major restructuring following loss of key clients. They interviewed an industry analyst who didn't pull punches. When you pass on innovation that your competitors then use to eat your lunch, someone has to be held accountable. But the real knife twist came from an unexpected source. Robert Chen, Brightcore's CEO, gave an interview to GeekWire. We're examining why certain opportunities weren't properly evaluated. The board takes full responsibility for any oversight in our innovation assessment process. Oversight, assessment process. They were throwing Richard under the bus without even naming him. That afternoon, as I was reviewing implementation plans for Constellation, Patricia Huang called. Did you see the news? About the restructuring. No, about the dominoes. Boeing just announced they're not renewing with Brightcore. They mentioned seeking more innovative partners. 3 guesses who they're calling next. I sat back in my chair, my own chair, in my own office, in my own company. 6 months ago, Richard had humiliated me in conference room A, called my life's work a pet project, reduced me to nothing in front of my peers. Now his division was being restructured. His clients were fleeing. His reputation was in ruins. Elena? Patricia was still on the line. You there? Yes, sorry. Have Boeing call James. We'll set up a meeting. You don't sound as happy as I thought you would. Was I happy? Satisfied. Yes, vindicated, absolutely. But happy? I thought about Richard, probably sitting in his corner office right now, watching his career implode. I'd wanted him to face consequences, but seeing it happen felt different than imagining it. I'm focused on the future, I told Patricia, not the past. But that was only partly true. That evening, alone in my office as the Seattle skyline lit up, I pulled up the photo from my last day at Brightcore. Someone had snapped it without my knowledge. Me walking out with a box of my belongings, shoulders straight, chin high despite everything. You were wrong about me, Richard, I said to the empty office. But more importantly, you were wrong about innovation. It doesn't care about your org chart or your politics. It just needs someone brave enough to believe in it. Tomorrow, the Wall Street Journal would run a feature on Green Shift Labs. Next week, we'd start implementation for Constellation. Next month, probably Boeing. The empire Richard built on dismissing others' ideas was crumbling. And I'd lit the match with the very innovation he'd rejected. The news broke on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing code with the development team. Marcus saw it first, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips as he stared at his monitor. Elena, you need to see this. The headline on the Seattle Times business section was stark. Brightcore announces closure of Strategic Development Division, 87 jobs cut. My hands stilled on the keyboard. 87 people, not just Richard, but analysts, project managers, developers. People who'd sat silent in that conference room, yes, but also people with mortgages, families, dreams. There's more, Priya said quietly, pulling up an internal email that someone had leaked. Richard's been terminated, effective immediately. They're citing catastrophic failure in strategic assessment and client retention. The office had gone quiet. Everyone was watching me, waiting for my reaction. They expected celebration, perhaps. Victory laps. Champagne. Back to work, I said instead. We have the Boeing presentation Thursday. But I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about Richard's assistant, Sandra, who'd always been kind to me, about the junior analysts who were just following leadership's direction, collateral damage in a war they didn't start. Tom called during lunch. It's chaos here. Security escorted Richard out an hour ago. Wouldn't even let him take his personal items. 20 years with the company, and they gave him a cardboard box and 15 minutes. How's everyone else? Scared, angry, lost? He paused. Some of them are saying you orchestrated all of this, that you planned it from the day he humiliated you. I didn't plan for them to lose their jobs. Tom, I just wanted to build something that mattered. I know, but perception and reality. He trailed off. Jennifer's been crying all morning. She got promoted to try to salvage what's left. But there's nothing to salvage. The division's top 3 clients are gone. The board wants blood. That afternoon, an unexpected visitor appeared in our lobby. Sandra, Richard's former assistant, holding a manila envelope. He wanted me to give you this, she said, her eyes red-rimmed, before security came. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Richard's handwriting, usually so confident, looked shaky. Elena, you won. I underestimated you, dismissed you, and I paid the price. The board made it clear, my failure to recognize your innovation cost Brightcore its future in green technology. I won't apologize for how I ran my division. But I will acknowledge that I was wrong about your capabilities and your project. You've built something remarkable. Don't let it become what I became, so focused on power that you forget why you started. Callahan, Sandra, I called as she turned to leave. If you need a reference, or if you're looking, I already have 3 offers, she said with a sad smile. 20 years as an executive assistant to a VP means I know where all the bodies are buried. Other companies value that. But thank you. The next few days brought a flood of resumes from former Brightcore employees. Some I recognized, people who'd watched my humiliation in silence. I interviewed a few, hired none. Greenshift didn't need their kind of loyalty. The Boeing meeting went flawlessly. They signed for $30 million, plus performance bonuses. We were now worth more than Brightcore's entire strategic development division had been at its peak, but success felt hollow that week. The Financial Times ran an analysis, The Fall of Richard Callahan, a case study in innovation blindness. They detailed every mistake, every missed opportunity, every client lost. They called it one of the most spectacular executive failures in recent tech history. Marissa found me on the roof of our building that Friday evening, watching the sunset over Elliott Bay. "You're not responsible for what happened to him," she said. "I know." "Do you? Because you've been mooning around all week like you kicked a puppy." 87 people, Marissa. 87 people lost their jobs because Richard couldn't see past his own ego. No, they lost their jobs because Brightcore built a culture where ego mattered more than innovation. You just held up a mirror. She was right. But knowing that didn't make it easier to sleep. A week later, LinkedIn showed Richard had updated his profile. Consultant, Strategic Advisory Services. The mighty VP reduced to freelance consulting. His profile views were public, thousands of people checking to see how far he'd fallen. Jennifer called that night. "The board's conducting a full review of all rejected innovations from the past 5 years. They're terrified there's another Green Shift Labs in there somewhere." "Is there?" 3, actually. All from women or minorities. All dismissed by Richard in public meetings. All now working for competitors. The pattern was clear. Richard hadn't just failed to see innovation, he'd systematically crushed it when it came from anyone he deemed unworthy. "He destroyed his own division," Jennifer said quietly. "Piece by piece, rejection by rejection. You were just the one who proved it." The rain had just stopped when I drove past the Brightcore building for the last time. It was a year since that humiliating morning in Conference Room A, and the company logo was being removed from the facade. Acquired by a competitor for parts, the papers said. The building would be converted to condos. I pulled into the parking garage, the same spot where I'd once parked my ancient Honda between German luxury cars, feeling small and out of place. Now my Tesla Model S sat there. A gift to myself after the Boeing deal closed. The security guard recognized me. "Ms. Morris, didn't expect to see you here. Just needed to pick something up." "Carl." He nodded, understanding without explanation. Some ghosts needed confronting. The 42nd floor was nearly empty. Conference Room A stood vacant, the mahogany table covered in dust. I stood where Richard had stood, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city looked different from up here now. Not intimidating, but full of possibility. "Thought I might find you here." I turned. Richard stood in the doorway, looking older, grayer, diminished. His expensive suit had been replaced with khakis and a polo shirt. "Security called me," he explained. "Said you were here. I've been cleaning out some final things myself." We stood in silence. Two people who'd destroyed and rebuilt each other's worlds. "The Wall Street Journal wants to interview me," he said finally. "About what happened. About you." And I told them the truth, that I was a dinosaur who couldn't see the meteor coming. He laughed bitterly. "Greenshift is valued at what now? 300 million? 350 after the federal contract." He nodded slowly. "You know what the ironic part is? I actually did read your proposal. The whole thing. The night before that meeting." I felt my chest tighten. "And it was brilliant, revolutionary. Everything you said it was." He met my eyes. "But it came from you. The woman who'd graduated from State, not Stanford. The developer who worked too hard, cared too much, didn't play the game right. So I killed it." The admission hung between us like a physical thing. "I didn't want you to fail, Richard," I said quietly. "I just wanted my work to matter." "I know. That's what makes it worse." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, the industry knows now. Every tech company in Seattle has revised their innovation assessment process because of what you did. They're calling it the green shift effect, the cost of dismissing ideas based on who presents them." After he left, I stood alone in that room where my professional life had ended and my real life had begun. I thought about the journey, the garage, the sleepless nights, the small victories that led to bigger ones. The 87 people who lost their jobs still weighed on me, but I'd hired 12 of them. The others had all landed elsewhere, some crediting the wake-up call for pushing them toward better opportunities. My phone buzzed. Priya. Fed contract just officially closed. We did it. That was the difference. Richard had built a kingdom where only his voice mattered. I'd built a company where every voice could change everything. I drove to our new headquarters, a converted warehouse in Georgetown with exposed beams and natural light. No mahogany tables or corner offices. Just open space where innovation could come from anyone, anywhere. The team was waiting with champagne. Marcus had even brought his kids, who were playing with our office dog. Tesla, yes, we named her after the company car. Tom had joined us full-time last month. Jennifer would start next week as our VP of Strategic Partnerships. A bit of poetic justice we both appreciated. Speech, someone called out. I looked at these faces, people who'd believed in something everyone else had rejected. Who'd worked impossible hours to prove that merit mattered more than politics. A year ago, a powerful man told me I needed to learn my place. I began. He was right. I did need to learn my place. It just wasn't where he thought it was. I raised my glass to the team, to the journey, to the sweet taste of proving everyone wrong. My place was here, building the future he couldn't see. Our place is wherever innovation needs a voice, regardless of whose voice it is. And their place? I smiled, thinking of Richard's empty office, his demolished division, his fallen empire. Their place is in the past, serving as a reminder of what happens when ego matters more than ideas. The celebration went late into the evening. As Seattle's skyline glowed through our windows, I realized something. I hadn't set out to destroy Richard Callahan. I'd set out to build something meaningful. His destruction was just the natural consequence of standing in innovation's way. Revenge, it turns out, isn't best served cold. It's best served through massive success that makes your enemy's failures impossible to ignore. And as I watched my team, my company, celebrate our federal contract, I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and triumph. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? Are you on your commute, at home, or perhaps taking a break at work? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect with you all. If you enjoyed Elena's journey from humiliation to victory, please subscribe to the channel for more revenge stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And don't forget to share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a similar situation at work? What would you have done in Elena's shoes? Let's discuss in the comments.